Folks, what's going on? HeirofCarthage here, and I am back in Total War Rome 2. It has been a long time. We got some good replays sent in. I'll be covering some other content on games like this soon, so if you want to see it, make sure to stick around. This one is actually going to be the first of some replays from a tournament final, and these were sent in, and Team A here that we're looking at is going to be Bobi and the Duke. And then Team B is over here is AC Sofado and FG Hamilkar Barca. So we're going to have an Arverni Getae matchup up against Rome and Galatia. Now it's been a long time since we've covered Rome 2, and for those who are less familiar with it, maybe more familiar with Warhammer 2 content, a couple key things to remember in this game is that obviously there's no magic present, at least not directly. There are some pretty interesting commander abilities that are kind of borderline magic, but nowhere near like Rome 2, right? Javelins are a big thing in this game, and getting some ranged advantages early is usually a big thing. Cavalry charges hit hard on unbraced units, and then there's different types of cavalry, shock cavalry, melee cavalry, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so the game's a little different. You can spread your lines out a lot thinner, typically, in this game than you can in Warhammer as well. Let's check out some of the units up front. We're going to have Spear Warriors and MLG Levy Freemen. These units are picked because they're cheap, they have a shield, and they can protect the front lines from a cavalry charge, and they also have javelins to hurl back at enemies that are charging. Now, I am probably going to forget which cheap units have javelins and which do not, because it doesn't always show you that a unit has javelins on these melee units, so it's sometimes hard for me to remember. Now, as for the Getae ally here, this is going to be Spearmen up front for much the same reason. So yeah, spears all across the front, and a unit's weight on this game can be seen somewhat by the banner here. The very heavy units will kind of have the squared off banner on the bottom, and lighter units will usually have this more triangular shaped bottom, or a rounded one sometimes even. But in any case, here we go. The second line for the Arverni is going to be Celtic Slingers. Now, the trade-off between slingers and archers in this game, slingers do a little more AP damage, and they don't do near as much overall damage, though, but they're more effective against armor, especially later in a fight. And remember, too, that in this game you'll see a unit start to take a lot of damage, and you don't have a health bar like you do in Warhammer. So slingers tend to probably not get a whole bunch of kills early on, but same with archers. They'll be chipping away at a unit's overall health. And with the armor piercing, the slingers can be effective late in a game. Let's check out the main core of the Arverni here, which is going to be Chosen Swordsman and Oathsworn. You can see the Chosen Swordsmen over here are a heavy infantry, whereas the Oathsworn are a very heavy infantry. And typical barbarian infantry like this has solid attack and really good weapon damage, and they were a very much preferred unit. And then Chosen Swordsmen are one of the better non-super heavy swords in the game. There is Heavy Horse backing them up. Arverni Heavy Horse is exactly what it is, Heavy Horse. It's good against other cavalry, has a bonus versus large, decent in melee. Also has a pretty solid charge. There's a bunch of Dacian bowmen and heavy bowmen here. They have slightly higher armor, very good unit, and then there's a bunch of noble swords for the Getae, and they are backed up by spear horsemen. Now, as for Rome, Rome has quite a few Evocati cohort and veteran legionaries. These are higher attack type legionaries, and they all have very good armor, Roman infantry, and they also have javelins. But the Evocati and veteran legionaries represent Rome's higher attack units and can be more effective in combat. There are a couple of mercenary horse skirmishers. These are javelin cavalry out here. And then as for the Roman cavalry, they have Socii Equites, however that's pronounced. And you're going to see that both teams were hesitant to engage each other early on, and it's because they're looking to get the proper skirmishing advantage. Now, Rome's legionaries are actually checkerboarded slightly here with the Vigiles up front, even though Evocati and veteran legionaries are post-Marian type reform. Remember, your general's unit in these games is just a normal unit, and in this case the Legatus is just a heavy horse unit, smaller than usual. They're not particularly powerful, like you may be used to in Warhammer. And as for Galatia, they have a mix of Galatian legionaries. I believe there is a naked sword unit here. This is like a high charge, cheaper damaging unit. And then there's mercenary Cappadocian cavalry mixed with a noble horse general and more Galatian swords and horse skirmishers out on the flank. Some of the initial engagements are going to get started now. The Roman auxiliary Syrian archers are going to start trading fire with the Getae, and the Dacian heavy archers will be able to return fire. These Roman legionaries are very dangerous units. They don't have as good of a charge as the what do you call it, barbarian units per se, but their javelin attacks, like the barbarians, are also very powerful, and their leadership and armor makes up for what they lack in weapon damage a lot of times. You're going to see here a clashing of lines, spears, horses charging in, looking to hit unbraced units and do some early damage. And then you can see heavier swords following up the lighter, and veteran legionaries keen to take this engagement without getting hit by the noble swords, which is why you'll see some of the noble swords pulling back and re-engaging to ensure that they get their charge bonus against some of the legionaries. Though, yeah, here we're going to see a few of those units pulling back. In this case, the spears pulling back rather than the noble swords. You're going to see some of these heavier swords trying to actually get the charge, because it won't be good for them if they just continue this melee without having had their charge bonus, which is fairly significant, whereas the Roman charge bonus is about half of what it is for the barbarian units. Now you're going to see the Galatian player come over here and try and give some support against Getae. And here comes that recharge here, the noble swords looking to recharge the veteran legionaries. And again, they need that charge. You can see quickly the veteran legionaries' numbers dropping, because the charge of the barbarian infantry is very hard hitting, and that's why the Vigiles are leading this line for the Evocati and veteran legionaries, and it's worked mostly. You can see the Socii Equites looking to gain a flank here, but it is up close to the red line, so they have limited room to maneuver. And over here we're actually going to see a command, or I think this is a unit ability, the Frenzy. Yeah, this is a unit ability, Frenzy. It'll make the unit really tired, but gives them the ability to do a lot more attack damage for a short period of time at the cost of a whole bunch of, I'm thinking Warhammer 2, Vigor, at the cost of Vigor. Yep. Anyway, we can see the fight kind of developing over here. The fight's not going bad for Rome, mostly, though not every fight is fantastic here. Like, these mercenary axe warriors are doing actually okay, all things considered, up against the veteran legionaries. The noble swords here are actually holding out pretty well. Here, the noble swords are outmatched, and you can see the Arverni horse looking to support the Getae, and the Roman line is struggling against the heavy swords. And as good as the Roman lines are, barbarian swords are a bit of trouble for them, at least the very heavy versions are. And you've yet to see a decisive engagement, really, between the Arverni and the Galatian. I think the players are trying to avoid overcommitting while they're seeing what happens by supporting over here. You can see the Arverni heavy horse continuing their charges. The noble swords have finished the fight, and now we're going to see a push of heavy horse through here. One of the veteran legionaries is under heavy bow fire. That is their shielded flank, but when they turn, they're going to expose their rear, which is unshielded, and they're going to take a lot of damage there. Really, those axe warriors are doing fantastic. Now, axes in the game don't have a very good attack rate, or sorry, damage, which is probably based on their attack rate, but they do pretty good armor-piercing damage. For an axeman, they just don't have a whole lot of attack to begin with, just a lot of it is armor-piercing. Slingers are going to become valuable, like I said, later in the game. They'll be chipping away at a unit's health. They have a pretty good amount of ammunition, and if they're left alive until later in the game, they can be a pretty dangerous unit. Whereas, in my opinion, archers tend to run out of ammunition a little faster, but they can do some damage quicker, and I find the archers to be pretty good against horses fairly early on in a fight as well. Yeah, the Roman line over here is mostly collapsed. A lot of their legionaries are now in retreat, and we're going to see the remnants of that fight here, which is a pretty tattered Getae line, but there's quite a few spear horsemen. And the Galatians still have their horse skirmishers to support the Socii Equites, and you're going to see them coming in. Javelins in this game have an innate bonus versus large, and so it's very helpful to have a unit like horse skirmishers when dealing with other heavier cavalry. See over here the Syrian archers firing into here as well. The leftover noble swords of Getae fighting along with some heavy horse up against some mercenary Cappadocian cavalry, which is another bonus versus large cavalry, very well armored. Mercenary Cappadocian Cavalry is a very solid unit indeed. Whereas over here, the Arverni are picking away at Levy Freeman because they're an easy target, I guess, right now. And we finally have an engagement of Oathsworn and Chosen Swords against Galatian Legionaries and Naked Swords. Now, Galatian Legionaries are kind of a balance between your Barbarian Sword and the Roman Legion. Very interesting unit. But the Oathsworn here is going to have probably slightly better AP damage. And the Chosen Sword in support of them, they have a similar weapon. You can see, not quite the same, but a similar weapon in the way they fight. Again, the Barbarian Swords tend to have slightly more damage at the cost of armor sometimes, but those heavier units from the Arverni will still be pretty well armored and ready to fight. The Roman units tend to have like the highest armor and very good leadership values. Here the heavy horse is fighting the Equites. Equites are relatively cheap, not quite up to snuff with noble horse or heavy horse, but at their cost, Equites can be a pretty effective unit, which is why you'll see them on the field for Rome. I think along with Sociae Equites, they are pretty effective cavalry force. Obviously, some factions have better cavalry forces. The Romans weren't really known for all that heavy cavalry per se. Here's the clash of barbarian infantry, Galatian and Arverni. Fairly brutal fight right now, but this match is slowly crumbling in favor of Team A, which is Bobi and the Duke. Or Bobby and the Duke. Apologize if I'm not saying it right. But yeah, they've definitely got an advantage here. The Roman line did not succeed in its initial engagement versus the Getae, and slowly but surely we're kind of seeing that breakdown ensue afterwards. Now, obviously, those teams are still fighting hard for everything they can get, but they got a pretty overwhelming objective here. There's still a decent number of Oathsworn, but look at this. The Oathsworn chasing a Galatian spear unit, so it's going to take a little damage disengaging with these Galatian legionaries. And then ammunition's going to play a role here too. We can't really see the amount of ammunition because the UI back then just didn't afford us that. You could see it, I think, when you were in battle. Let's see if it's still here. No, it just shows, I think, their overall ammunition here. Yeah. Yeah, it just shows their overall ammunition here. I think you could see it when you were in-game, but I don't think you can see it on a replay. Yeah, we're going to see continued engagement here. Look at these slingers. What an angle. Yeah, these Galatian spears are going to get absolutely destroyed by getting hit in the back by slingers. It's going to be a very nice engagement there. Dacian heavy bowmen have decent armor for a bow unit, and so thrown into scraps late in the game, they'll be able to last just a little longer. See here the Oathsworn taking a Cappadocian cavalry charge, but reinforced by Levy Freeman. I'm trying to remember whether they patched this game to take some of the javelins off of Levy Freeman, or if they still have them. I know at one point Levy Freeman were probably one of the most cost-effective units in the game. It's been so long since I played the game that I honestly can't even remember, you know, how all the patch notes rolled in. But I mean, even with a nerf, Levy Freeman tend to be a solid unit. But just about every unit in this game picked up javelins over the course of a couple of patches. I say every unit, just about every sword or spear infantry unit. Not all, but many. I think like Falx units and a lot of stuff like that tend to not come with it. But yeah, a lot of things do. And javelins, very, very important for this game. Very important for their anti-large. And it helps soften up an enemy infantry unit before you get into the melee. See the power bar definitely shifting in favor of the Arverni-Getae alliance here. See some Levy Freeman. I guess the Arverni were into the same thing as the Beastmen there, getting the Razor Gore herds on their banners. You gotta love it. It was a prelude to Warhammer, wasn't it? The mercenary Cappadocian cavalry here, getting finished off by a combo of spear horsemen and Levy Freeman. You can see it's gonna flee away and continue charging to try and cause its damage, but there's really just too little here for the Romans and the Galatians to pull this off. You can see these are the types of abilities that some of these units have. Loyalty is a commander ability, I believe, and so is battle rhythm. The color they are here kind of tells you the impact they're having at the moment. Loyalty is keeping the Galatian units in the fight. That battle rhythm gave this unit more attack earlier, but now it's hitting its vigor because the unit's tired from the extra attack. You can see the Roman Legatus one bringing in the loyalty thing here. See the cavalry being cycled, attempting to get as much out of it as possible. It's not all that different from Total War game. The Total War game, leaving cavalry engaged too long when it doesn't belong in the melee is not what you want. And there are a few units that are pretty solid in melee, like Campanian cavalry is very solid in melee. But it just depends on the stats of the units. A lot of cavalry units are going to do good by getting their cycle charges in. So that is going to be army losses, and Team Bobi and the Duke are going to take Game 1. We'll head to Game 2 after this. Remember, this is finals for a tournament. I do have a link in the description. You can go check out the link for the tournament, and there were banned factions and stuff too. All that'll be in the description, but mostly I'm just excited to be casting some Total War Rome 2 again. And I'm going to play some myself soon, as well as a few of the other historic titles, just because I want to be able to spend some time in this. We can see Bobi here leading the Arverni and the Duke as the Getae. We take a look through the main units. I mean, Oathsworn are where you need to do a bunch of your damage, and the Oathsworn did a lot of his damage, though still a pretty honorable performance out of these chosen swordsmen as well. These are very solid units for not being an elite tier sword. I think they're more technically like a medium tier sword, by cost at least. The Slingers getting good value because they lived most of the game and able to fire a lot of ammunition. And then Heavy Horse is just a fantastic support unit for the Arverni. They may not do great on the charge against something like a really heavy shock cavalry, but in prolonged melee, they're very effective. They have a shield, which helps protect them from missile fire. They are a very solid horse unit. And then the mix of Spear Warriors and Levy Freemen, always nice support. And then we'll take a look at the Roman side here. The Legatus actually getting a pretty wonderful number of kills there. So the General's unit coming in clutch, even though the General's units aren't the most powerful. I do believe the Legatus unit has pretty solid armor, though, and used properly, it is capable of doing some work. You see the Evocati cohort, one of them doing very well here. I'm not exactly sure what it engaged, if it was lighter things or if it just had a really good engagement. One of the veteran legionaries, or sorry, two of them also doing pretty well. The gladiator spear gladiatresses, I missed these earlier. These are interesting spear units that Rome can bring in. They're actually one of the few spear units in the game that's pretty high attack, though I think they're squishy to a cavalry charge. They're a very interesting support unit. And then Syrian archers is a solid unit too. You can see some of these got some decent kills, even picking up a chevron. If we take a look at the Duke here with the Getae, I mean, his infantry line just crushed. And noble swords are very similar to Oathsworn. They're a very solid sword unit, one of the best in the game, and they did very well in this case. Good engagement by the Duke to make sure that he tried his best to come back and get those charges where he didn't have them in order to continue the fight, using that slightly better AP and charge to get through the superior armor and leadership of the Roman infantry. And the Dacian heavy bowmen really cleaning house here. These guys did a fantastic job in the battle. And then his bow horsemen kind of joining in with that. And then look at this, even one of the spear horsemen picking up a ton of kills. So well done by the Duke. And then Hamilkar Barca here. I love the namesake, by the way. That's fantastic. Playing Galatia. Galatia is probably one of the fun factions in the game, too, just in the sense that they have an interesting mixture of units. You can see he had some mercenary Syrian archers mixed with his Galatian legionaries and naked swords here and his noble horse general. So cool game. Cool game indeed. Hamilkar, Sofado, Duke, Bobi. Looking forward to seeing more of these matches. If you want to see it too, make sure you subscribe and come back around and we'll finish this one up. Like I said, some links and description of the tournament will be in the video description. So make sure you check that out and hope you enjoyed a little something different. And I will, of course, be continuing Warhammer content. This is not the end of Warhammer content. And as I said in a previous video, Total War historical content is not going to make up the majority of content on my channel until we probably have the release of a new Total War game. And even then, it depends on the competition from Warhammer, because I like Warhammer better than historical Total War right now. But it doesn't mean I don't like historical Total War. I absolutely do, which is why I'm making a video on it, and I was excited to see these replays, and I'm excited to play these games some myself. Anyway, HeirofCarthage signing out for now. I will see you all soon with some more content.